Hey groupers, Pastor Marshall. Well, this Sunday I started with my last major junior high moment where you wanted to belong to something so bad that you couldn't think, you couldn't sleep, even your eating was messed up, and you thought that all the time about what you were going to wear, what you were going to say, what you were not going to wear, what you were not going to say. Well, I wonder if you would share in your small group your last big junior high moment. Maybe it was a new job, maybe you were going on a date, maybe you were meeting someone's family, maybe even at our church, coming here for the first time. What was your last major junior high moment? Well, as we get to the 6th chapter, I grabbed verse 26 from the 5th chapter because I think it's closely connected. When Paul talks in verse 26 about provoking and envying each other. I said in my sermon that the vast majority of all relationships are dominated by these two things, provoking and envying each other. We provoke those that we think are below us, that we think are less than us. We provoke them, we just make sure they know that we're better than them, or at least we think that we are. And then we envy those that we think are above us, that we think are better than us. We want to be like them. We want them to like us. Well, I wonder, first of all, do you agree that the vast majority of relationships in this world are either about feeling lower or feeling better than someone else? And how does the gospel, the grace of God, change this? Does the gospel, the grace of God, change us? How does the gospel make us not feel lower than everyone else, or at least someone else? And how does the gospel not make us feel better than other people? How does the gospel make everyone equal? And is there anything else in the world that makes everyone equal? Is there any organization, is there any country that makes everyone equal? Well, in verse 1, Paul commands us to restore a fallen brother or sister gently. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you just to spend some time in your small group talking about what does that look like. Brainstorm as a group some ways so that you could restore someone. Think of a hypothetical situation or two, and what would it look like to restore that person gently? What wouldn't work in restoring that person? Maybe you have some examples from your own life of what worked that you saw, and maybe you have some examples of what didn't work. Let's talk about how do we restore each other gently. Now, in verse 4, Paul writes about testing the quality of our own character. And he says that we can have pride in how we're doing. Is pride a good thing? I thought pride was a bad thing. How can pride be a good thing when we think about testing the quality of our character? Paul says we don't compare ourselves to anyone else, but we can have pride. What does that mean? And when is pride a bad thing? Because it certainly seems like it's more of a bad thing than a good thing. Well, Paul also commands us to help one another with our burdens. Not little burdens, which I told you in my message on Sunday. The word is the word for a backpack, but our heavy burdens. The word there is a word for a cart that someone would have to be towing behind them. So I'm wondering, just for a second, how can the church be involved in helping relieve someone's cart? Again, spend just a little bit of time talking about some situations that you know in our church or in our community where we could help alleviate someone's burdens, where we could lift something off of them. Verse 9 reminds us that it's going to potentially create weariness when we care for one another's burdens. So also spend a little time talking about how do we fight weariness in helping one another. What does helping look like? How do we keep from burnout, weariness? Now in verse 6, we see the goodness that we're supposed to share with our instructors. So what I'd love for you to do is just for a second stop and talk to your small group leader. Talk to your small group leader. Share the goodness with them. Talk about how much you enjoy your small group, how much you enjoy all the preparation that they do. Every week they listen to this silly video a couple of times trying to get ready, and they go through Jack's notes, and so just spend a little time saying thank you. Well, finally, every week we remember what the application was. And I suggested that Jesus is the best example of how to be great at relationships. What if I want you to do is I'd like you to just think of some examples. I don't think you can argue with that. You can't argue with Jesus being the best at something. But think of some examples in the Bible of where Jesus did something that was a great model for us when it comes to relationships. How did he show us modeling friendship? How did he show us modeling conflict? How did he show us modeling family? Think of some examples in the Bible. Maybe even turn to them in your scriptures. Well, I hope that you have a great small group, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks when we talk about the book of Ephesians. God bless.